Welcome back. We're talking to one of the great young sailors coming out of the Detroit area, Michael Kirkman, who is a former Novi high school sailor, member of Bayview, just got finished participating in the U.S. Match Racing Championships in Chicago. We're going to talk about the match racing because we were also involved in watching you at the Detroit Cup this year, and then you were the skipper last year for the NCAA Boston College National Championship team. So I think that's a pretty good deal. I guess the easiest thing to start with, what is it you like about match racing?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on the show. And the thing I really love about match racing is just the ability to attack people. In a lot of fleet racing or general sailing, you're not like slamming people or attacking on them really hard, like you're trying to be a little friendly. In like match racing, it's hard nose, like you guys are opponents like any other sport, like basketball or football. So I think it's really cool to just be able to really try to defeat your opponent and doing it one on one. There's a lot of different strategies of how you want to attack the person. So I think it's just a really cool game and it's a cool discipline within sailing.
It's almost like full contact karate. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the one of the things that was cool watching the Detroit Cup on the river right in front of Bayview was that the ferociousness of how you attack each other. You know, even to the point of there was one of the races where it was on the north end of the course where you guys were just fighting and nobody ever got back to the starting line because
Mhm.
it was more about the fight than it was about getting to the next mark,
Yeah.
which I think which is really kind of cool. So let's talk a little bit about Chicago because that's kind of a big deal. You end up sailing with Ryan Seago and then Jacob Dahl and Ethan Wheeler. This is the big. I want everybody to understand. This is the match racing champion for the country that U.S. Sailing puts on. So talk a little bit about the race and the experience you had there.
Yeah, so I teamed up with Ryan Seago for my only the second time I've ever sailed with him, but we've been opponents for a while, competing against each other in different match races and being from the same club, it was cool to finally get to sail together and pick up how he sails match racing versus how I have, because he's been doing it for a long time. So it was a really cool event. We traveled to Chicago for it against the top 10 teams that qualified for it in the country. And it was there was good breeze all weekend, which led to some good racing, and we ended up fifth place, losing in the quarterfinals to the eventual winner, Peter Holtz and his team, who were really solid. But we felt like we got better every day, and in the consolation round robin for the teams that didn't make the semifinals, we went 5-0, so that secured us fifth place.
In looking at match racing over the last 2 or 3 years, I'll use the name Chris Poole, who was ranked number one in the country last year. There's there seems to be names that float in and out of this actual field of sailors across the country. And so on any given day, almost anybody can win. Right? Is that a fair estimation?
Yeah, it really is. Obviously the top people win more often, but everyone can have an off day, or if someone puts himself in a bad position, a lot of the sailors that are match racing are very smart, and anyone can make you pay for a mistake you make, even if you are the best. So I feel like, yeah, anyone can win on any given day.
As I look down the list, Peter Holtz and Wick Wire, there was a lot of really good sailors at this championship. This was some of the best in the country.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough event. Every race there was no like bye races where you really felt like you could easily win. A lot of them were you got to sail your A game to win.
What have you learned in match racing that helps you in just everyday sort of maybe cruise racing or maybe Mackinacs and those kinds of races?
Yeah, I think one of the things that helps me most from match racing that translates into that is really just like thinking about where you would position yourself against someone else if you want to beat them. Like in match racing, it's all about putting yourself in front of the other person. So when you're in a fleet race and let's say you're in second trying to pass the bone first, like match racing has really helped you like learn about where wind shadows are so you can actually attack the person properly. Or like if you're trying to cover them without like if you're trying to loose cover the fleet when you're sailing upwind, you know where you want to go because in a match race, this is where you would force the person to go one direction. So it's really helped you tactically thinking of where you really want to position your boat in certain situations, which has been really cool.
You just finished with a finance degree from Boston College. Can you look at possibly being a pro sailor at this point, or is that more of a pipe dream?
Yeah, I thought about it every once in a while, but I more think of sailing as a hobby for me, and I like
Okay.
enjoying doing it with my friends and those and like people I enjoy sailing with. So at least for now, I'm settling down for a regular job. Gonna sail on the weekends or do a bunch of different cool events. But I love sailing and I want to keep doing it. But Probably definitely not as an occupation.
You guys competed out of Belmont Harbor, and you guys were on Tom 28. Maybe explain what that kind of boat is. I'm not real familiar with that.
Yeah, so it's a boat that's pretty good for match racing. It's a very open concept boat. So it's 28 feet long. The hull, um, the whole inside is like wide open, which is kind of interesting and it was kind of cool. Um, I've never sailed the boats anywhere else. I think they said there was a fleet in Europe somewhere, but other than that, this is one of the only fleets of the boats. They're not super fast, but they're very identical and they're pretty good for match racing. They don't turn super fast, so you really got to think about when you're going to maneuver and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool boats. Took a little while to figure out. They're a lot different than a lot of other boats. They don't build speed very fast. Okay.
Part of your career, you've ended up a lot of times with your success as a skipper. You know, you're running the boat, and I understand all those processes, but does a skipper have to think differently than somebody who's part of a crew? Because in Chicago, you're part of a crew, but with some of the successes you've had, and even in college, you've been a skipper. So, talk to me about the two different roles.
Yeah, so crewing was definitely a different experience for me. I actually did a little bit of crewing for match racing last last year. I crewed in the youth match race worlds in Saudi Arabia and then in a regatta in Australia. So I've done a little bit of it, but it's definitely a different perspective because you're really focusing on different things. So like when you're driving, you're really focused on looking at other boats, trying to make the boat go like in a fast line and put the boat where you want it. When I was crewing this weekend, I was trimming the main. And so you really gotta, I really realized how much emphasis as a crew you have to put on not worrying about the other boat and worrying about just your job. Like that was something that was really important and preach that we kept preaching for all of us was our jib trimmer, his eyes in the pre-start were on his jib, making sure we were sailing full speed. He wasn't looking around at the other boat like the skipper was of figuring out how to steer. And the main trimmer, he was helping with tactics a little bit, but most of the time I have to focus on making sure I'm trimming the main perfectly to make sure our speed's going well. So it was really just a different perspective of different things to focus on. Sometimes like I'd catch myself looking around at the boats too much and I'd mess up or like my trim wouldn't be perfect. So it's really cool to just try and figure out everyone has a different job on the boat and it's crucial to make sure that everyone's doing their job to the best ability and that's what the best teams are doing. So it's
Talk to
definitely
the 50,
interesting.
if you've talked to the 52 crews of the Sail GP guys, it's always time in the boat. They have that opportunity to get that crew to get meshed. With match racing, it really is it's very rare, well, not rare, but it's not often that you have the same group of guys because everybody's kind of switching boats and different things. So I would think that cohesiveness within the crew, knowing what you're doing and making sure that if you recruit somebody for, whatever position you're going to be on the boat, they all have the competency of it. But I would think the skipper's got to pull that together. And cohesiveness makes more sense than somebody, an overbearing skipper who wants to do nothing but yell. I mean, you got to have cooperation in your crew.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you don't have a crew that's can do what they're supposed to do, you're not going to be able to win any race, let alone fleet racing. It's even more apparent in match racing because everything's got to happen so quick and you're trying to gain a quarter boat length so you can luff someone or you make it around the mark in front of them. So it's really important to just make sure that everyone knows what they're doing and keeps working on it. And the cool thing with the match racing that you'll really notice is the first day when the round robin starts, a lot of the teams that haven't sailed the boats, you'll notice they're like a little slower with the poles, but every day you'll see eventually the races get tighter and tighter and tighter and at the competition level just the sets are perfect by the last day. And so it's really cool to just see everyone continue to work as the days go on.
Maybe this isn't a fair statement, but match racing doesn't seem to get the notoriety that it deserves. Is that fair?
Um, yeah, I would say it doesn't get quite as much as other things.
I see the quality and the level of sailing, and when you watch it live, it's amazing watching it. It's a little bit like watching hockey live versus seeing it on TV. And I just don't think a lot of people who sail, and certainly not even racers, don't necessarily even spend that much time because you don't see the crowds that you might see in other races. Maybe that's an observation that isn't fair, but you guys are really good sailors.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of it compared to other types of events, when you get the fleet racing, you get a lot more people involved. So maybe that helps build driving crowds, whereas match racing, it's more small teams, so it doesn't bring as many crowds. But I agree. Like if I were to watch any discipline of sailing, like I would rather watch team racing or match racing way more than fleet racing. It's just so much more entertaining and more fun, in my opinion.
Could you take some of the match racing process and run it down to junior sailing so the kids get that kind of opportunity and maybe a little lesser boat or maybe a Flying Scot or something? Is that something you could do with juniors, or is that more something you really got to think about more at the college level?
Um, you could definitely incorporate match racing into junior sailing and just you don't have to give them get into all the deep rules, but being able to decide how to maneuver yourself against other boats is skills that I mean, I would have really, if I did more match racing as a junior sailor, it would have been really helpful, like in fleet racing situations, like when you're on the line, like figuring out how to like get under someone or luff them, and just I think it's definitely a path for junior sailors that could work out well.
Somebody told me you were involved in some J70 championships lately. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I sailed the J70 Corinthian Worlds in Marblehead.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that was a pretty cool event. We had just I think 30 boats or something like that, and from a bunch of different countries, and it was pretty windy the first. It was a 4-day event. Pretty windy the first two and lighter the last two. We ended up getting fifth place, which was pretty cool. Um, we were a pretty light team. I actually sailed the event with one of my buddies, Andrew Lockhart, and then my mom and my dad. So we were a full family boat out there, which was kind of cool. And it was really fun just sailing against all the other teams that were all Corinthian, and you don't have the pros out there. So everyone's just sailing for fun and for the joy of it.
Are you the skipper?
Yeah, I skippered the event.
How do you skipper mom and dad?
Uh, it was actually easier than you'd think. Me and my dad, we have a J120, and so he normally drives that. So I help him with tactics on that, and he'll help me with tactics on this. And my mom, was she didn't interrupt any of our tactics disputes, or she knows she's the boss on land. So on the water, it was a little more open to us.
It also helps that they're both really good sailors. That's
Yeah.
part of it too. So I think that's something. I guess last couple questions. What is it you like about match racing, and kind of pull that together with what it is that you kind of like about sailing? What is it you love about sailing?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, like sailing, I just love being outdoors and being on the ocean or lake. It's just something like you feel like you're in a different world. And I think the other cool thing, especially in like smaller boats or match racing, is there's a level of physicality to it, but there's also like the mental strength that you need in sailing for the long days and like tactics of figuring out where you want to go because a lot of some sports are like if you're like a runner or a rower, it's like a lot of it's just like physical strength. So I think the cool thing about sailing is it's like you really got to be able to think about where you want to go, but you also have to have a level of fitness and to be able to make the boat go how fast it goes and wherever you want to put it. So I think that's cool. And then to relate that to match racing is in match racing, you really figure out how important every like a inch of gain is. And if you can make the set that much better, you can hook the guy and get on his wind shadow. So I really think it's cool. Just you really see how important every little thing is. Whereas in a fleet race, it can get a little like nullified. Like it's not as important to lose like that quarter boat length, but in match racing, you lose that quarter boat length and the race is over and you go from getting 1 point to zero. It's a lot bigger gain than maybe losing second place to third place. So that's one of my favorite things.
I've had a chance to spend some time on the back of a couple of 52s and a couple different races, the Queen's Cup, and you realize how good those guys are at that level. But you also you learn just from watching. I'm just a cruiser, but when you sit on the back of that boat and watch those guys orchestrate, especially in big wind, we did the Queen's Cup last year, and we're coming across the lake at 17, 16 feet, whatever the numbers are, and you watch them. It's like watching a ballet or an orchestra work. It's an amazing thing, and you learn just by watching those guys, and having come back to your own boat and do a little better, a little better at the process because you watch guys that are really good. So, well, listen, congratulations on your national championship at Boston College. I know that was last year, and then obviously we got some. I think we have more talent in Detroit and in the Great Lakes than I think sometimes people recognize, and we've got some really good young talent. Hopefully, you guys will find your way farther up the ladder. So, appreciate all the time you spent with us, and have a great winter.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is me? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes. Look at that. Yeah, you even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you got to get it trending.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Let's go.
Can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Welcome back. We're putting a final installment of our conversations with Wally Cross, the great Midwestern sailor, international sailor. Wally, we've really appreciated all the stuff you talked about this year. You just went to Annapolis, and we just wanted to kind of touch base a little bit on what was the first time you've been back in a while.
Wow.
And just maybe talk a little bit about the show, because you had a chance to see it firsthand.
Yeah, it's interesting, Craig. I mean, for years being a sailmaker, I've worked these shows, and it's a rarity that I can actually just walk as an observer. And it was nice. I haven't been back to that show for it seems like 20 years. And beautiful day in Annapolis, sunny, and massive crowd. I mean, I got to the entrance maybe 20 minutes beforehand, and it was already a deep line, 2 lines to get in. And so it opened at 10 a.m. And boy, people just rushed in there, and it's overwhelming how big it is. A variety of tents. I would bet there's 4 good-sized tents that have everything from a polish to your car to instruments to porta potties to fall weather gear, rope, on and on and on and on. And if you want to learn about products, it's probably a good show to go to, because anything that's out there on the market today for the sailor, racer cruiser, is available to look at, which is cool. I did talk to the guys at B&G for a while, and there's some really nice instruments out there that I think will help out sailors. In terms of boats, it's surely seems like a cruising type show. Even the racing boats, the J boats that are come out, the 36, the 40, the 45, what I call they're compromise boats now. They have a race appeal to them because they're J boats and they perform well. But there's also a big cruising component to them as well.
You say comparison boats. I think of racer cruisers from the 80s. A lot of us have those kinds of boats. They really are cruisers. They're not racers. You're paying $1 million for a boat, $700,000 for those kinds of boats, especially if you're anything over 35. Can you really compromise, or is it one or the other? My point to that is if you spend $800,000 for a boat, I guess you want it to be pretty well outfitted with the kinds of things you'd expect for luxury.
Well, I think that's the trend today is, if you're going to get a new boat, there's an exception. You look in Europe and so forth, and the TP52s, there's dedicated, expensive race boats,
right? No
question. But I sense the trend is getting that two-way boat. The boat I'm sailing, this Italia 14.98 of Tim Rivera, Seagull 1, is a two-way boat. It's probably one of the better two-way boats out there that can race very well, but is luxurious down below. And I saw a lot of that in Annapolis. All those J boats are that way. The Chinots, probably the Benetos and Chinots are more cruising design, but they kind of give you that little race appeal with the plumb bow, the hard chimes, the dual wheels, carbon rigs, things like that add a little bit of sex appeal to it, but probably more shifted towards the cruise size, whereas the J boats are a little bit more shifted to maybe the performance size.
You've gone to the show for a lot of years. I'm sure in the beginning when you were going there were boats that we could probably both afford. Obviously, most of the boats at this show now, I'm guessing, are probably out of the reach of the regular sailor in our area, certainly. Are we pricing ourselves out, or is it just one of those things that's just what the market bears?
I think your earlier comments, right? I'm worried we're pricing them out. I mean, even this new Swan 28, which is super sexy, they're trying to promote a sailing league with this boat, with a variety of regattas, a lot of them in Pensacola, but a variety of regattas around the summer in this boat. But it's still a $250,000 boat for a 28-footer, and that's before. So, yeah, I worry about it. And, I worry about it, Craig.
I saw an ad for a Melgus 19, which is a brand new boat. And in the ad, they promote that they've got this hole in their fleet. Now they've got this 19-footer. it's $85,000.
Right.
That's not an entry level boat for a guy to get involved. You know what I'm saying?
It's real money. And, and again, if it's not built in this country, you're also now dealing with tariffs too, which is going to really affect the new boat buyer,
Right.
the big boat buyer, and nothing's being built quickly. So I'm concerned.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the reports we've read about the show, and I'll ask you specifically, is that lots of catamarans, and it was sort of that's kind of the next big wave at that level of price. They're comfortable, they're easier to sail, I would think. Was that show full of catamarans?
Big cats. Yeah, big cats, and they look luxurious. They look comfortable. I know they're comfortable. We did a cruise on one a couple years back, Lagoon 52, and they're super comfortable. But they're just floating condominiums.
Right.
They don't tip. They don't. They're real stable in the water. Some sail better than others, but most don't sail that well at all. And but that gives some people have appeal, but they're massive creatures in the water when you think about docking these things and so forth.
We were at Belmont about 2 weeks ago, and I got on a big catamaran, and I'm looking, and there's apartments right across from Belmont. There's all kinds of these upper, as you come down Lakeshore Drive. And I sort of I was on the third floor of this catamaran, and I know you can see weather from the third floor, but I wonder if there's a limitation to your effectiveness as a sailor being this far up. And then the Recaro racing seat that you're seeing, right, that was the captain's. It was the pilot's chair, and it would order special for this boat. I would fall asleep in it. It must be a hammock. So I guess it would be the ultimate in comfort in those boats. But maybe that's what folks are looking for.
I don't know, but it's everybody has an interest, but that seems to be a popular interest. It's just hard for me to get excited about that.
Is the Annapolis Boat Show something that every sailor or serious sailor should at least go once, just because they have the opportunity?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? More than the experience, the size, the all the parts and pieces. Like I said, are in the tents. Some massive boats. It is a scene. It's a lot of walking. It's a really, really big show. No, I'm glad I went. I'm not going to rush back, but I'm glad I went. Absolutely.
Good. I don't go to those shows because I would suffer from envy horribly, and it kind of goes with the territory. I'm going to ask the last question of this year for the season.
Yeah.
As I pointed out, we can't tell you how much we've appreciated your time with the show and being able to do some stuff. We'll do some stuff next year. Two, I'm going to give a little promotion. Right now, you're October, November. If you're looking for a sale, this is that time you want to call Wally for sure.
Good time.
Good prices and opportunities and all those things taken care of. So that's the plug. Hopefully, folks in Quanah will appreciate that. Last tip: you're putting your boat away for the winter. What's the one thing I might forget about?
It's interesting. I was in Caseville yesterday with a customer, and for me, it's really, really important to look at the boat out of the water, even though it's critical to measure the boat when it's in the water for a new sail and stuff like that. But out of the water is really fun, because you've heard my line before, right? If you had $10 to spend on your boat,
right,
you spend 9 on your bottom and 1 with me. Because the 1 you spend with me is going to look great because of the 9 you spend on your bottom. And that was the case. I was looking at a CNC 110, and all the little things stand out. The scuppers not being perfectly flush. How rough the keels look. With this shallow water right now, Greg, a lot of these keels are getting banged up on the bottom. And the problem is a lot of these boats sit on their keel on the wood, and it's really hard to access that. So all that stuff adds up. And so I just gave this guy yesterday a checklist of about 15 items to do to improve. And I like seeing boats. So anyway, to answer your question, look at your boat, make a checklist, what you can do to improve. Because my focus is, if you just do 10 things a year to improve your boat, you'll see your performance will steadily increase every year after.
Is it a good idea to work on the side of the boat if you've got scratches now in the fall maybe versus the spring?
Look at this weather we've had.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right? The weather's been fantastic. It's still nice today. Maybe it's in the high 50s, but you could surely do a lot of the physical work now before it gets ugly. But more importantly, make a plan. This is the time to make a plan. Can that prop be better? Can the rudder get closer to the hull? Can our trailing edges be a little bit crisper? On and on and on. But this is the right time to make a good plan.
Appreciate everything. Appreciate the season. You have a great winter, and we will certainly see you in the spring.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Walt.
minutes, a baby is born with a cleft, making it difficult to talk, hear, eat, and even breathe. Many won't receive the treatment they need to thrive. Through training and financial support, Smile Train gives the power of healing back to local communities so they can provide life-changing surgeries and other services at no cost to families. Help us change the world one smile at a time.
Welcome back. We're talking to Ben Wixson, who is one of the originators of the Lake St. Clair Sailors video blog on the internet of 5.7 thousand subscribers. That's a lot of bodies. You started it 7 years ago, you said, I think. Does that sound right?
Yeah, 7 years ago, 2018, I believe.
All right. It is one of the more used blogs in the Midwest and one of the top 10 in the country. I don't know if you knew that or not. I did some checking with Facebook. Just kind of ran a random check. It's a pretty impressive organization you guys have started. So give me a little gist of how it got started. And I know you came to sailing late, so that would be kind of interesting as part of that story as well.
No, that's no, I'd love to talk about that. So I started sailing when I moved to Grosse Pointe. I didn't grow up sailing at all. I had a neighbor who was a member of Crescent, George Macon, who's got a Shock 35 over at Crescent. At the time, he had a boat at Windmill Point, and one day he invited me sailing with him, and I was hooked ever since. But I noticed that there were these groups on social media around all the interests that I had, whether it was record collecting or music, all these other things that I enjoy. But there was really nothing about a local community of sailors outside of the DRYA. DRYA did have a group on Facebook that was kind of going, but it was more focused on racing. And at the time, I wasn't a huge racer. I was just getting into the community. So for me, it was just an opportunity to try to connect people so I could meet people with a similar interest. I mean, that's really how it came about.
What is the hardest part of being a moderator for a page like this, or even what is the joy? The joy is obviously seeing it grow and seeing the interaction between different groups. But is it hard? Because there's so many rules with YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that these social media platforms have changed so much over the years, and I guess the biggest challenge is keeping the world that's outside of sailing and outside of the interests of sailors from mucking up the community, because let's face it, we live in a very polarized world, and it's hard for people sometimes to separate other things that are going on in the world, which are affecting all of us at different times for various reasons, whether it's the economy or politics or whatever. Not that those aren't important, but they can turn a community into disarray. So keeping all of that out becomes a challenge. Although I'll be honest with you, like early on, I think once the ground rules were set that this is a place only for sailing, and mainly for the local area, we're trying to keep it local. I mean, there are things that affect our sailing community from outside Lake St. Clair that are obviously welcome to be posted in the group, but we try not to. There's a lot of powerboat groups on Facebook. There's a lot of boat for sale groups and boat building groups that are focused on other areas of the country or the world, or cruising groups, but we try to keep it local and keep it on topic, I guess. With that said, I think most people can appreciate that the posts are all like that, so they want to contribute in a similar manner, I guess is the best way to put it. So I don't know that it's a challenge, though. I wouldn't say that it's a challenge. I have very few issues moderating that group. It kind of moderates itself.
When you say mucking up, I think of social integrity. That's probably a bit more of a familiar word. How many physical hours in a month? How many hours do you actually spend working on the site? I'm just curious.
These days, it's not as much, and part of that's because I'm working on a PhD right now and haven't been able to focus as much on this. However, there's a couple other people that help moderate. There's a gentleman named Len who's out of Windsor Yacht Club, who's a photographer, Len Strahl, and then my friend Martin, who's another Crescent member, actually, Martin Engel King, he's a boat named Rascal, but I don't think it's in the harbor up at Crescent right now. He's doing some work on it, but he kind of helps keep an eye on things when I'm not around. But it's it's a few hours a week just here and there in between, whatever else I'm working on. And as much as I can, I try to find relevant content to post. Sometimes, it's stuff that you're posting and trying to amplify content that you're posting that I think is relevant and just other things that I find interesting.
I find interesting lately the rules. If we put them up, we've been getting more. We've had to wait now. We always get a post directly to your network, but now it gets in. It's got to be approved by administrators. The rules are getting more difficult, and I get that there's part of it looks like it's social content or it's business content, and it's funny because you start out. We have some commercials, and I say commercials. 10 Knots is a company that we've been able to help. They've got 3 or 4 commercials. We're just giving it away. We don't make any money on the show. And we've sent some PSAs in to try to make it look a little more ESPN-like rather than just a talk show kind of thing. But that's created another set of problems for YouTube. And in this case, because it looks like we're advertising. And we're only doing the stuff from 10 Knots just to publicize the young ladies who are trying to get their feet off the ground on our lake, to try to give them some publicity in the small manner that we do. But it's been interesting. I've had to go back and I think anyway, it's fun to listen to because I think there's all kinds of comments. And a lot of it is just, families posting their pictures of a great day on a boat.
Honestly, that's my favorite part about it. Whether it's a, family just going for a cruise or somebody that did a Tuesday night race off the dock at Windmill Point that just posting pictures of their finish. I mean, that to me is fun because it's at the end of the day we've come to be a community of people that all know each other. So that photograph is somebody else's boat, and you hope that some other day when you're out sailing, someone else gets a picture of you with your boat. So
you think the popularity of these kinds of sites or our kind of show, I noticed that more people are using pictures, video, especially sophisticated video in some places. They're going on their, whatever small design programs. I think it's enhanced the visual part of the sport because there's a lot more stuff on it there was even 5 years ago when we started.
Right.
And everybody now thinks they have and wonderfully, it just seems like there's more content from more places, and I think that doesn't hurt the sport.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's all very helpful because, well, I'll tell you this, taking good pictures of sailboats is not easy sometimes. I mean, especially if you're doing it with a phone, but we get people out with drones or with, telephoto lenses that are out on race boats on a weeknight in a beer can race, but getting great photos. I mean, that's amazing because it's not easy to get, but it does help the sport. I think it does. And, it's funny because I remember doing a DRYA regatta over the summer, and I got a chuckle out of this. And that I don't remember which race it was, but we ended up dumping our kite in the water right at the finish line of a windward leeward race, and it ended up on someone else's Instagram reel, and it was kind of funny because it would have been embarrassing if there weren't 4 other boats that did the same thing that day, but it was encouraging in that the person wrote the comment not to blast our boat for dropping our kite in the water, but it was like, props to these guys for still finishing the race. Because we're not professional racers. I'm not a Bora Gulari or a Don Riley. I'm not one of these people that I do it for fun on the weekdays and on weekends when I can. And we have good races and bad races, and what keeps people going into the sport is seeing the bad things, but knowing that everyone else is doing the same. And that we're all just out there kind of having a good time while we're doing it.
And looking at numbers, if you looked at some of the golf blogs and pickleball blogs, surprisingly, the blogs for sailing are better than the media for sailing in terms of its content. And it seems like sailing actually has more numbers. And my argument, tell me if you think you agree with or disagree with this. Most guys that sail and sail race are generally speaking one sport athletes most of the time.
Yeah.
They're so obsessed with it. It's all winter, even when they can't. There's discussions, whether it's DYRA's, winter speaker series. They tend to get a little myopic in and how much they love their sport. And my argument is that when you get out of high school, you go play amateur, you go do whatever. You can be a big time racer and be a racer your whole life. So the participatory nature of sailing and sail racing is different than every other sport we know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I think. Yeah.
And because of that, think about it this way. We closed down the junior sailing programs in the summer for 2 weeks so the guys can go race the Chicago race and the Port Huron race to match.
Yeah.
So it has a different parameter, and I think it has a different level of, I don't want to say craziness because I don't think that's, but certainly avocation, if not obsession to some extent. And I think that's why everybody has flags, everybody's competing, everybody wants the latest, this, that, or the other. My point to it is, I'm not saying you can measure passion, but boy, if you could, I would argue, having covered almost every sport, major sport as a reporter, I would say I don't think there's a more passionate sport than this. And I think it's reflected in blogs like you guys have set up. And I think that's just my own 5 cents worth. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because you can be on a sailboat and you can be racing on a sailboat at 80 years old. I have someone that will sometimes do foredeck. He's 79 some days, and he loves doing it, and he does a great job at it. But it's funny you mentioned that because you and I talked a little bit about your background in the Detroit rock music scene in the 60s and 70s. But I grew up, just to talk a little bit about community, but I grew up playing in like punk rock bands as a kid, and I played baseball in junior high, but when I got to high school, I just loved playing music so much that and I loved the community, like the DIY, do-it-yourself community around it. But it's one of those things where the friendships that I had at that time in my life and the interests that I had in that time in my life, I've carried on into being almost 40 years old. So it's like if you hear London Calling by The Clash as a kid, you don't give it up when you're 40 years old. If you heard it when you were 15, it sticks with you for the rest of your life. And I feel like sailing's kind of like that. It's always tangentially related to the things that you do, whether it's what you're doing on the weekends. I was at a seminar Thursday night for DRYA for their debrief for the season at Crescent, and they talked a little bit about, everyone talks about how sailing's in decline, participation in sailing as big boat sailing is kind of in decline. But one of the things Barb Seski mentioned was that the junior programs are actually growing. I think they were up like by a third in the past couple of years, which is good though. I guess what that's telling me is that there's a future for it. And maybe as people age out of it, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there was a generational gap. You might know more than I do about that. Maybe there was a generational gap. I think about it like the auto industry. You had my dad who worked in the auto industry, and you had people that were my grandfather who worked in the auto industry. But Gen X, they didn't go into the auto industry as heavy as some of these other people. So there is a gap. And now I work in the automotive industry and engineering. And, the gap between people that are in their 30s and their late 50s is like, it's big. So I'm wondering if that's the same thing that's going on in our sport, where we've got a gap between 35 and 55, and then maybe there's going to be a next wave.
I went back, and Ted Everingham used to have a show similar to this for a long time. You have conversations with him, but then look at the numbers. You mentioned you're looking at your PhD. I'm not somebody who looks at my opinion because I don't have an opinion about racing. What I do know in the 5 years that we've done this is I have interviewed some of the best in the world. I've had a chance to race on a 52. I've had a chance to be on a sail GP boat, and I'm a non-racer.
Right.
My point to the sport is that it is fairly transparent in that somebody like me, if this were golf, I couldn't golf with Tiger Woods.
Right.
If it was basketball, I couldn't play. I wouldn't be able to have the audience or the opportunity to have a conversation with, LeBron James. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
My point is that we've done a very poor job, in my opinion, and having done this now. In the last few weeks, we've had a bunch of journalists on. Richard Gladwell, who's the publisher of SailWorld.com. We had him on, and there's a discussion going on right now about lasers, the ILCA process. I'm the only guy that's actually talked to the performance sailcraft guy from Australia. And we got some stuff coming out in a couple of weeks that's going to be an international story about, we have an Olympics coming up. Get back to the point. You mentioned that DYRA said that we're up a third. We're not. And I know that we're not because John Pierce, who's the youth director for U.S. Sailing, I had this conversation with him last week, and Charlie Enright, while we had the 52 championships. Here's the example. You have one person that races at a junior program at pick a yacht club. Doesn't matter. The kid signs up for 3 sessions, 2-week sessions. They don't count it as 1, they count him as 3 unless he signs up for the 6 weeks. Well, it's not 3, it's 1.
Right.
So if you have 10 kids that sign up 3 times, that's 30 kids. No, you only have 10 kids.
Ah, okay.
Right? So why do we fudge the numbers? I'm sure it has something to do with accounting, all the rest of it. Or is it to make yourself relevant? One of the arguments that they're having at the ILCA conversation is everybody in television, everybody that's pushing the sport at the higher levels wants to go to foils, mostly because it's interesting, not because it's anything more than that, right?
Right.
Well, think of what a moth would cost. Think of what a 420 would cost. They're double between those
Right.
two. Nobody's got a bag of cash that's going to all of a sudden buy 30 foiling boats at Crescent, at Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, at Bayview, and scrap the bottom. You can buy a boat like mine, which has a 50-inch television and 24-inch mattresses on it. Very comfortable boat. It's a submarine downwind, but it's one of the most comfortable boats you ever sleep on. You can buy it for $15,000. But if I had to replicate a 30-foot boat at Annapolis last week, I couldn't do it for less than $250,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are there gaps? Yes. Are there beliefs that aren't necessarily fair? Clubs have to, and I think that's one of the things that this network does, is it looks at itself. I look at it from the outside in, but yet now 5 years in, we've had this great opportunity to have all these conversations with all these different people. And we could spend an hour talking about this, that, and the other, and that's really not the point. The blog gives opportunity to air it. And I just think there has to be continued discussion about that. That's my 2 cents, and I'll shut up after. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's kind of at the core of what building this group was about, because the idea is to connect people. We all belong to different sailing organizations or clubs, or maybe none at all. So how do we connect people that are at these different places together? And there's people that are good at doing that. Well, actually, I would say maybe we're not very good at doing that. That was the reason for making this. I think there's people that are good at doing it from a racing standpoint. I think DRYA tries hard to do that too. But you've got, I don't know, there's 18 member clubs for DRYA. I mean, in this area, which is most of the sailing and yachting clubs. And but we're not all at odds with each other. We're all part of the same community, but we don't see each other necessarily or necessarily converse with each other outside of a race party. So this is the place to do it, I guess you could say. But it's also the place for the guy that's got the Catalina 30 at Jefferson Beach that isn't in a yacht club, that isn't a racer, that has fun on his boat and that does projects on his boat and that wants to bring people out on his boat or teach people how to sail himself just on a weekday, a little cocktail cruise. I mean, it's for that guy too. So, yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting premise. I think the intent, and I think one of the things this network provides is the intent of various levels. And I'll give you one other example. Almost every other club that I know about has a hitchhiker program. So
Right.
a 17-year-old kid wants to go out and race. Oh, we have a program. If he just comes out on the dock on Thursday, we'll pick him up. How many 16 or 17 or 18-year-old kids are going to go on a boat with a bunch of adults my age, your age, that they don't know? Doesn't exist.
Right.
The intent is good, right?
Sure.
So it's a program out of Cleveland called More Kids on Sailboats. And what he found out was that if we just feed them better and they can bring a friend along, we might grow the sport. At Edgewater, they've actually grown the sport in their numbers. Our junior programs are actually going backwards if you don't count them 3 times. My point to it is sometimes the sport, we're so involved with our own competitiveness that we have wonderful ideas in December, but they don't necessarily translate in June because you're still scraping your bottom or you're fixing a sail.
Right.
And sometimes, and one of the things we've tried to do, Phoebe Wall has been on the show talking about, one of the great writers. We had a really good conversation with her. We have to talk with Gladwell. Media people are talking to each other on this show to give you an understanding that you got to pay attention to tending to the garden or the sport won't grow.
Right.
But if you're not paying attention and saying you are, it's kind of a lost exercise because you're not getting to that point, which is
I
what
agree.
the network can do better job at. And I think that's the thing that I'm impressed with what you guys are trying to do because it's a chance for people to talk someplace. And I think that's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I think that was one thing that I noticed early on when I started sailing. For me, it was trying to, find this network of people that sail and, you come across all these amazing people that are supportive of the sport, like Tim Profit and Todd Jones. And I mean, the list goes on, who were very early supporters of the group, but also, big names in local sailing. And, if something breaks on your boat, you can call Todd Jones and, he might drop it off at your house. I mean, he's done that before. So, I mean, It's
Right.
amazing. Like this amazing community that I wouldn't have known about if I hadn't started the group. Now, other people might have if they grew up in the sport, but I didn't. Um, but I think to kind of get to the point of your question is, where can people talk freely about what they love without it being their local yacht club group where they might get moderated because they're complaining about something or somebody or something that happened or something that ticks them off. But at the end of the day, if we can talk about it in the open and we find support for ideas, then we can maybe grow the good ideas and get rid of the bad ideas. And there's a lot of good ideas, and I like that Lake St. Clair Sailors has also been a place that people like Challenge the Wind Sailing and Detroit Community Sailing can actually advertise because I think they're doing an amazing job at getting people that are in areas of our region into the sport that may not otherwise be able to. I mean, I grew up 20 miles from Lake St. Clair, and I didn't step foot on a sailboat till I was in my 30s. So there's a big market for people to get into sailing, but it's just finding them. So yeah.
This has turned into a little bit more than just talking about the network, and I'm
Yeah,
not
sorry,
apologize for
sorry.
that. But one of the things, as we talked earlier, is again 5 years ago I wouldn't know half the guys I know now. If you had told me who Paul Goodison was, I'd have said who. And it's my point is with the passion of the sport that these guys have. Sometimes the competitive nature, and I'm really talking about the racing community more than just the cruising community.
Sure.
But the racing community is so focused in a short season. We're not in Florida, California, where I can do this 12 months a year.
Right.
Sometimes the stuff we're talking about gets pushed to the side because we've got 6 months to race and we're going to race, and we're not going to get anything else out of the way. And I admire that. It's a little bit like a surfer. If you lived in California, hung around surfers, you realize they're not a bunch of lazy bums. They're just guys who love the endeavor, their hobby, their whatever it is that it is. They don't care if they come to work late by an hour. When I lived in California, all of a sudden my news, if it was a good, if the sets were coming in right, my reporters wouldn't come in until 11 o'clock because they were supposed to come in at 10. They were out surfing, but the laid back atmosphere, they would work twice as hard when they came back in to cover that because it was just, and they were happy because they'd come in having just surfed for 3 hours in the morning.
Right.
Any devotion to that, this is the closest thing I've seen to devotion like that with these racers. And this is a whole lot different than the racing community. And being able to see the level and seeing the talent levels that we have here in the Great Lakes has just been amazing.
That is amazing.
I've said this 100 times. You get on a boat with these 52 guys, and you think you have a little understanding of sailing, and then you get on the boat with these 52 guys and realize you're a third grader. They're so good at what they do.
Yeah.
And it's just it's fun to watch those guys. You learn just watching them.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I think to your point, these people that are amazing sailors are right next to us some days on the lake. I mean, I keep my boat at Windmill Point Park here, but in Grosse Pointe Park. But the boat next to me is an S850 owned by a guy named Bill Gilbride, he's a member of Bayview, but he races on Tuesdays some nights, and he'd have Bora Gulari on his boat, who's an Olympic sailor. And the people on our boat, we'd be having snacks and drinks after a race, and Bora would be on the dock next to us. And I'm like, what world is this where you have Olympic sailors next to us who are grinding during the day and doing this for our little beer can race after, which is a hell of a lot of fun. But it's amazing that they're part of this same community. I don't know. Maybe it goes back to the old days. Like I think of the old days of playing music. I mean, these people that became successful playing in the underground, that never forgot their roots. You know, you'd see them out at a bar catching a great band that's maybe an up and coming band because they're still connected to that community. And I feel like we have that going on here in Detroit. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. This has been a really fun conversation. I'm not sure it wasn't more for you and I than it was anything else. I'm not sure we talked a lot about the network, but it is a great place to communicate, to sell, to discuss, just to let your
Yeah,
let your
connect.
pros out, as
Yeah.
it were. And I really thank you for putting that you guys putting the network together, because I think it does a lot of good. And you got almost 6,000 members. So that's a testimony to its success by itself.
I would never have known there were 6,000 people that were this into sailing in this area. I mean, just on Facebook, which is just a smattering of everybody. I mean, not everybody's on Facebook. So the fact that, yeah, almost 6,000 people, it's unbelievable. And it's a labor of love, but I love to do it. And I love the people I've met through it. So